The Assembly will now resume the general debate. And the next speaker is the President of Indonesia.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, distinguished delegates and representatives, today, in addressing this session of the United Nations General Assembly, I feel oppressed by a great sense of responsibility. I feel a humility in speaking to this august gathering of wise and experienced statesmen from east and west, from the north and from the south, from old nations and from young nations, and from nations newly reawakened from a long sleep. I have prayed to the Almighty that my tongue will find those words which are adequate to express the feelings of my heart. And I have prayed also that these words will bring an echo from the hearts of those who listen. It is my great pleasure to congratulate the President upon his appointment to his high and constructive office. It is also my great pleasure, on behalf of my nation, to offer a most heartfelt welcome to the 16 new members of the United Nations. The Holy Book of Islam has a word for us today. The Quran says, in my language, "Hai sekalian manusia, sesungguhnya aku telah menjadikan kamu sekalian dari seorang lelaki dan seorang perempuan, sehingga kamu berbangsa-bangsa dan bersuku-suku, agar kamu sekalian mengenal satu sama lain. Bahwasanya yang lebih mulia di antara kamu sekalian ialah siapa yang lebih takwa kepadaku." I might translate that as, "O mankind, I, Allah, made you from a male and a female, and divided you into nations and tribes, so that you should come to know one another. In truth, those who are most noble before God are those who most are in awe of Allah and do good works towards Allah." And the Christian Bible too has a word for us. "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men of goodwill. I am deeply moved indeed as I survey this assembly. Here is the proof that generations of struggle have been justified. Here is the proof that sacrifice and suffering have achieved their end. Here is the proof that justice has begun to prevail and that some great evils have already been banished. Furthermore, as I survey this assembly, my heart is filled with a great and fierce joy. I see clearly that a new day has dawned, and that the sun of freedom and emancipation, that sun of which we have dreamed so long, is already risen over Asia and Africa. Now, today, I address the leaders of nations and the builders of nations. But, indirectly, I speak also to those you represent, to those who have sent you here, to those who have entrusted their future to your hands. I greatly desire that my words shall strike an echo also in those hearts, in the deep heart of humanity, in that great heart from which has been brought so many shouts of joy, so many cries of sorrow and despair, and so much love and laughter. Today it is President Karno who addresses you. But more than that, though, it is a man, Karno, an Indonesian, a husband, a father, a member of the human family. I speak to you on behalf of my people, those 92 million people of a distant and wide archipelago, those 92 million people who have lived a life of struggle and sacrifice, those 92 million people who have built a state upon the ruins of an empire. They and the people of Asia and Africa, of the American continent and the European continent and the people of the Australian continent, they are watching and listening and hoping. They see in this organization of the United Nations a hope for the future and a prospect of the present. The decision to attend this session of the General Assembly was not an easy one for me to take. My own nation faces many problems, and time to solve those problems is always short. However, this is perhaps the most important assembly yet held, and all of us have a responsibility to the rest of the world as well as to our own nation. None of us can escape this responsibility, and surely none wish to. I am very sure that the leaders of the younger and the reborn nations can make a very positive contribution to the solution of the many problems facing this organization and the world at large. Indeed, I am confident that man may once again say, the new world is called to redress the balance of the old. It is clear today that all major problems of our world are interconnected. Colonialism is connected to security. Security is connected to the question of peace and disarmament. Disarmament is connected to the peaceful progress of the underdeveloped countries. Yes, all are connected and interconnected. If we succeed in finally solving one problem, then the way to the solution of all the others will be open. If we succeed in solving, for example, the problem of disarmament, then the necessary funds will be available to assist those nations which so urgently need assistance. But it is essential to all of these problems that all of these problems should be solved by the application of agreed principles. Any attempt to solve them by the use of power, or the threat of power, or by the possession of power, will certainly fail, and will in turn produce worse problems. Very briefly, the principle which must be followed is that of equal sovereignty of all nations, which is, of course, no more and no less than the application of basic human and national rights. there must be one principle for all nations, and all nations must accept that principle, both for their own protection and for the good of mankind. If I may say so, we of Indonesia have a very special interest in the United Nations. We have a very special desire to see this organization flourish and be successful. By the actions of this organization, our own struggle for independence and national life was shortened. I say in full confidence that our struggle would in any case have been successful, but the actions of the United Nations shortened that struggle and saved both us and our opponents many sacrifices and much sorrow and destruction. Why am I confident that our struggle would have been successful with or without the activity of the United Nations? I am confident of that for two reasons. First, I know my people. I know their unquenchable thirst for national freedom, and I know their determination. Secondly, I am confident of that because of the movement of history. We live, all of us, and everywhere in the world, in the time of the building of nations and the breaking of empires. This is the era of emerging nations and the turbulence of nationalism. To close the eyes to this fact is to become blind to history, to ignore destiny, to reject reality. We live, I say again, in the time of the building of nations. This process is inevitable and certain, sometimes slow and inevitable, like the movement of molten rock down the side of an Indonesian volcano, sometimes swift and inevitable, like the bursting of flood waters from behind an ill-conceived dam. Slow and inevitable, or swift and inevitable, the victory of national struggle is a certainty. When that march to liberty is complete, the whole world over, then our world will be a better place. It will be a cleaner place and a much more healthy place. We must not cease from struggle at this moment when victory is in sight, but instead we must redouble our efforts. We have a pledge to the future, and that pledge must be fulfilled. In this, we do not struggle for ourselves alone, but we struggle for all mankind. Yes, our struggle is even for those against whom we struggle. 5 years ago, 29 nations of Asia and Africa sent their representatives to the Indonesian city of Bandung. 29 nations of Asia and Africa. Today, how many free peoples are there? I will not count them, but look around this chamber now. Then tell me whether I am right or not when I say that this is the time of the building of nations and the time of the emergence of nations. Yesterday, Asia, and that is a process not yet completed. Today, Africa, and that too is a process not yet completed. Furthermore, not all nations, the nations of Asia and Africa, are yet represented here. This organization of nations is weakened insofar as it rejects the representation of any nation, and especially of a nation which is old and wise and powerful. I speak of China. I speak of what is often called Communist China, which is for us the only real China. This organization is greatly weakened precisely because it rejects the membership of the biggest nation in the world. Every year we support the admission of China to the United Nations, and we will continue doing that. We do not give our support merely because we have good relations with that country, and certainly we do not do so from any partisan motive. No, our position on this question is guided by political realism, by short-sightedness, excluding a vast nation, a nation great and powerful in terms of numbers, culture, the attributes of an ancient civilization, a nation full of strength and economic power. By excluding that nation, we make this international organization much weaker, and so much further from our requirements and our ideals. We are determined to make the United Nations strong and universal and able to fulfill its proper function. That is why we consistently support the representation of China in our number. Furthermore, disarmament is a pressing need of our world. This most vital of all questions should be discussed and solved within the framework of this organization. Yet, how can there be a realistic agreement on disarmament if China, one of the most powerful nations in the world, is excluded from the deliberation? Representation of China in the United Nations would involve that nation in constructive world affairs and would thus immensely strengthen this body. In this year of 1960, the General Assembly again comes together in its annual gathering. But this General Assembly must not be seen merely as another routine meeting, and if it is regarded as a routine meeting, then this whole international organization may well be threatened with dissolution. Mark my words well, I implore you. Do not treat the problems you will discuss as routine problems. If you do, then this organization, which has afforded us a hope for the future, a prospect of international conciliation, will perhaps be disrupted. It will perhaps disappear slowly beneath the waves of conflict, as its predecessor did. If that happens, then humanity as a whole will suffer, and a great dream, a great ideal will have been shattered. Remember, you do not deal only with words. You do not deal with pawns upon a chessboard. You deal with man, and with the dreams of man, and with the ideals of man, and with the future of all men. In all seriousness, I tell you, we of the newly independent nations intend to fight for the United Nations. We intend to struggle for its success and to make it effective. It can be made effective, and it will be made effective, but only insofar as all its members recognize the inevitabilities of history. It will be effective only insofar as this body follows the course of history and does not attempt to dam or divert or delay that course. I have said that this is the time of the building of nations and the breaking of empires. That is most profoundly true. How many nations have achieved their freedom since the Charter of the United Nations was written? How many peoples have thrown off their chains of oppression? How many empires built upon the oppression of peoples have crumbled into dust? We who were voiceless in the past are voiceless no more. We who were silent in the misery of imperialism are silent no more. We who struggle for life was cloaked under the mantle of colonialism are hidden no more. The world is changed since that historic day in 1945, and it is changed for the better. Out of this era of nation building has come the possibility, yes, the necessity of a world free from fear, free from want, free from national oppression. Today, this very day, at this General Assembly, we could prepare ourselves for a projection into that future world, the world of which we have thought and dreamed and made visions. We can do that, but only if we do not treat this meeting as routine. We must recognize that the United Nations faces a big accumulation of problems, each of them pressing, each of them a possible threat to peace and peaceful progress. We are determined that the fate of the world, which is our world, will not be decided above our heads or over our bodies. It will be decided with our participation and cooperation. Decisions vital to the peace and future of the world can be decided here and now. Here are heads of state and heads of government gathering in one place. There is the framework of our organization. I very sincerely hope that no questions of rigid protocol and no narrow feelings of hurt personal or national feelings will prevent this opportunity from being used fully. A chance like this does not come often. It should be fully exploited. We have a unique opportunity now for combining private and public diplomacy. Let us grasp that opportunity. It may not come again. I am very well aware that the presence here of so many heads of state and heads of government meets the hopes of millions of people. They can take vital decisions on establishing a new look for our world and consequently also a new look for the United Nations. It is appropriate now to consider the position of the United Nations in relation to this era of nation building and new nationhood. I tell you this, for a newly born or a newly reborn nation, the most precious possession is independence and sovereignty. Perhaps it may be, I don't know, but perhaps it may be, that this sense of holding the precious jewel of sovereignty and independence is confined to the nations newly awakened. Perhaps, as generations pass, the sense of pride and achievement grows dim. It may be so, but I don't think so. Even today, 200 years later, is there any American who does not thrill at the words of the Declaration of Independence? Is there any Italian who does not today respond to the call of Mazzini? Is there any citizen of Latin America who does not still hear an echo from the voice of San Martin? Indeed, is there any citizen of the world who does not respond to that call and to those voices? We all thrill, we all respond, because those voices were universal in time and place. They were the voice of suffering humanity. They were the voice of the future, and we hear them still ringing down the ages. Now, no, I deeply believe that in sovereignty and national independence there is something which endures, something which is as hard and brilliant as a jewel, and far more precious. Many nations of this world have long possessed this jewel. They have grown accustomed to owning it, but I am convinced that they still hold it the most dear of their possessions, and will die rather than give it up. Is it not so? Would your own nation ever give up its independence? Any nations worthy of the name will die first. Any worthy leader of any nation would die first. How much more precious then must it be to us, who once held the jewel of independence and national sovereignty, then felt it snatched from our fingers by well-armed brigands, and have now recovered it for ourselves. This United Nations is an organization of nation-states. Each one of it holds that jewel tight and precious. We have all freely banded together as brothers and equals in this organization. As brothers and as equals, for we all hold equal sovereignty, and we all hold that equal sovereignty as equally precious. This is an international body. It is not yet either supranational nor supranational. It is an organization of nation-states and can function only insofar as it is the will of those nation-states that it do so. Have we all unanimously agreed to surrender any part of our sovereignty to this body? No, we have not. We have accepted the Charter, and the Charter is signed by fully sovereign, fully equal nation-states. It may well be that this body should consider whether its members should surrender any part of their sovereignty to this international body. But if any such decision is made, it must be made freely and unanimously and equally. It must be made by all nations equally, the ancient and the new, the emergent nations and the old established, the developed and the underdeveloped. This is not something which can be imposed on any nation. Furthermore, the only possible basis for any such body as this is strict equality. The sovereignty of the newest nation or the smallest nation is just as precious, just as inviolable as the sovereignty of the biggest nation or the oldest nation. And furthermore again, any transgression against the sovereignty of any nation is a potential threat to the sovereignty of all nations. It is within this world picture that we must regard the world today. Our one world is made up of nation-states, each equally sovereign, each resolved to guard that sovereignty, each entitled to guard that sovereignty. And again I say it, and I repeat it because it is basic to an understanding of the world today. We live in the era of nation building. This fact is more important than the existence of nuclear weapons, more explosive than hydrogen bombs, more potential value to the world than atomic fission. The balance of the world has changed since that June day, 15 years ago, when the Charter was signed in the American city of San Francisco, at a moment when humanity was emerging from the horror of war. The fate of humanity can no longer be decided by a few large and powerful nations. We, too, the younger nations, the burgeoning nations, the smaller nations, we, too, have a word to say, and that word will surely echo down the years. Yes, we are aware of our responsibility to the future of all nations, and we gladly accept that responsibility. My nation pledges itself to work for a better world, for a world free from strife and tension, for a world in which our children can grow proud and free, for a world in which justice and prosperity reign supreme for all men. Would any nation refuse such a pledge? Some months ago, just before the leaders of the great powers met so briefly in Paris, Mr. Khrushchev was our guest in Indonesia. I made it very clear to him that we welcomed the summit conference, that we hoped for its success, but that we were skeptical. Those four great powers alone cannot decide the questions of war and peace. More precisely, perhaps, they have the power to disrupt the peace, but they have no moral right, singly or together, to attempt to settle the future of the world. For 15 years now, the West has known peace, or at least the absence of war. Of course, there have been tensions. Yes, there has been danger. But the fact remains that in the midst of a revolution engulfing 3/4 of the world, the West has been at peace. Both great blocs, in fact, have successfully practiced coexistence for all those years, thus contradicting those who deny the possibility of coexistence. We of Asia, I repeat, we of Asia, we have not known peace. After peace came to Europe, we endured atomic bombs. We endured our own national revolution in Indonesia. We endured the torments of Vietnam. We suffered the torture of Korea. We still suffer the agony of Algeria. Is it now to be the turn of our African brothers? Are they to be tortured while our wounds are still unhealed? And yet, the West is still at peace. Do you wonder that we now demand respite from our torments? Do you wonder that now my voice is raised in protest? We, who were once voiceless, have demands and requirements. We have the right to be heard. We are not subjects of barter, but living and virile nations with a role to play in this world and a contribution to make. I use strong words, but I use those words deliberately, because I feel strongly about this matter. I use strong words deliberately because I am speaking for my nation, and because I am speaking before the leaders of nations. Furthermore, I know that my Asian and African brothers feel equally strongly, although I do not venture to speak on their behalf. This General Assembly is to be seized of many important matters. No matter, though, can be more important than that of peace. Concerning this, I do not at this moment speak of issues arising between the great powers of the world. Such issues are of vital concern to us, and I shall return to them later. But look around this world of ours. There are tensions and sources of potential conflict in many places. I stress within this body, for only this assembly begins to approach a true reflection of the world in which we live. Think, please, think for a moment of what would be possible if we could evolve a basis for genuine disarmament. Think of the vast funds which would be available for improving the world we live in. Think of the tremendous impetus which could be given to the development of the underdeveloped, if even only a part of the defense budget of the great powers were diverted in that direction. Think of the fast increase in human happiness, human productivity, and human welfare if this were done. I must add one word on this subject. If there is any greater immorality than the brandishing of hydrogen weapons, then it is the testing the testing of those weapons. I know that there is scientific disagreement about the genetical effect of those tests. That disagreement, however, is in terms of the numbers affected. It is agreed that there are evil genetical effects. Has those who authorize the test ever seen the results of what they do? Have they looked at their own children and thought about those results? At the present time, the testing of nuclear weapons is suspended. Not, mark you well, not forbidden, but only suspended. Let that fact serve as a beginning then. Let that fact serve as the basis for prohibition of testing and then for real disarmament. Before leaving the subject of disarmament, I must make one more comment. To speak of disarmament is good. Seriously, to attempt the making of a disarmament agreement would be better. Best of all would be the implementation of an agreement on disarmament. However, let us be realistic. Even the implementation of a disarmament agreement would not guarantee peace to this sore and troubled world. Peace will come only when the causes of tension and conflict are removed. If there is a cause for conflict, then men will fight with pointed sticks if they have no other weapon. I know because my own nation did that very thing during our struggle for independence. We fought then with knives and pointed sticks. In order to make peace, we must remove the causes of tension and of conflict. That is why I spoke deep from my heart about the necessity of cooperation to bring about the final and glorious end of imperialism. Where there is imperialism and where there are simultaneously armed forces, then the position is a dangerous one indeed. Again, I speak from experience. That is the situation in West Irian. That is the situation in the 1/5 of our national territory which still labors under imperialism. There in West Irian, we have imperialism and the armed forces of imperialism. Bordering that territory, our own troops stand guard by land and sea. Those two bodies of troops face each other. And I tell you, that is an explosive situation. Very recently, those young and misguided troops who were in West Irian defending an outmoded conception were reinforced by an aircraft carrier, the Karl Doorman, from their remote homeland. I tell you that then the situation became positively dangerous. The commander-in-chief of the Indonesian army sits in my delegation. There he is. His name is General Nasution. He is a professional soldier and an excellent one. Like the soldiers he leads and like the nation they defend, he is first and foremost a man of peace. More than that, though, he and our soldiers and my nation are dedicated to the defense of our homeland. We have tried to solve the problem of West Irian. We have tried seriously and with great patience and great tolerance and great hope. We have tried bilateral negotiation. We tried that seriously and for years. We tried and we persevered. We have tried using the machinery of the United Nations and the strength of world opinion expressed here. We tried and we persevered with that too. But hope evaporates. Patience dries up. Even tolerance reaches an end. They have all run out now. And the Netherlands has left us no alternative but to stiffen our attitude. If they fail correctly to estimate the current of history, we are not to blame. But the result of their failure is that there is a threat to peace, and that involves, once again, the United Nations. West Irian is a colonial sword poised over Indonesia. It points at our hearts, but it also threatens world peace. Our present determined effort to reach a solution by our own methods is part of our contribution towards securing the peace of this world. It is part of our effort to end this world problem of an obsolete evil. It is a determined surgical effort to remove the cancer of imperialism from the area of the world in which we have our life and being. I tell you in all seriousness, the situation in West Irian is a dangerous situation, an explosive situation. It is a cause of tension, and it is a threat to peace. General Nasution is not responsible for that. Our soldiers are not responsible for that. Karno is not responsible for that. Indonesia is not responsible for that. No. The threat to peace springs directly from the very existence of colonialism and imperialism. Remove those checks to freedom and emancipation, and the threat to peace disappears. Eradicate imperialism, and the world becomes immediately and automatically a cleaner place, a better place, a more secure place. I know that when I say this, the minds of many will turn to the situation in the Congo. You may ask, has not imperialism been ejected from the Congo, with the result that there is now strife and bloodshed? It is not so. The deplorable situation in the Congo is caused directly and immediately by imperialism, not by its ending. Imperialism sought to maintain its foothold in the Congo, sought to mutilate and cripple the new state. That is why the Congo is in flames. Yes, there is agony in the Congo, but that agony is the birth pang of progress. An explosive progress always brings pain. Tearing up the deep roots of vested interests, national and international, always causes pain and dislocation. We know that. We know, too, from our own experience, that development itself creates turbulence. A turbulent nation needs leadership and guidance, and it will eventually produce its own leadership and guidance. We Indonesians, we speak from bitter experience. The problem of the Congo, which is a problem of colonialism and imperialism, must be solved by application of those principles I have already mentioned. The Congo is a sovereign state. Let that sovereignty be respected. Remember, the sovereignty of the Congo is no less than the sovereignty of any nation represented in this assembly, and it must be respected equally. There must be no interference in the internal affairs of the Congo, and certainly no open or hidden support for disintegration. Yes, of course, that nation will make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we all learn from mistakes. Yes, there will be turbulence, but let that go on, too, for it is a sign of rapid growth and development. The extent of that turbulence is a question for the nation itself. Let us, individually or collectively, assist there, if we are requested to do so by the lawful government of that nation. However, any such assistance must be clearly based upon the unquestioned sovereignty of the Congo. Finally, have confidence in that nation. They are going through a time of great trial and are suffering deeply. Have confidence in them as a newly liberated nation, and they will find their own way to their own solution of their own problem. I will here utter a very serious warning. Many members of this body and many servants of this body are perhaps not too well aware of the workings of imperialism and colonialism. They have never experienced it. They have never known its tenacity and its ruthlessness and its many faces and its evil. We of Asia and Africa, we have. I tell you, do not act as the innocent tool of imperialism. Do not act as the blind right arm of colonialism. If you do, then you will assuredly kill this organization of United Nations, and with it, you will kill the hope of countless millions, and perhaps you will make the future stillborn. Before leaving these questions, I wish to mention another great issue, somewhat similar in nature. I refer to Algeria. Here is a sad picture in which both sides are being bled and ruined for lack of a solution. This is a tragedy. It is quite clear that the people of Algeria want independence. There can be no argument about that. If they had not, then this long and bitter and bloody struggle would have ended years ago. The thirst for independence and the determination to achieve that independence are the central factors of this situation. What is not yet decided is just how close and harmonious should be the future cooperation with France. Very close and very harmonious cooperation should not be difficult to achieve even at this stage, although perhaps it gets more difficult as the days of struggle pass. Then let a plebiscite be held under the United Nations in Algeria. To determine the wishes of the people on just how close and harmonious those relations should be. The plebiscite should not be concerned with the question of independence. That has been settled in blood and tears, and there certainly will be an independent Algeria. A plebiscite such as that I suggest would, if it is held soon, be the best guarantee that independent Algeria and France will have close and good cooperation for their mutual benefit. Again, I speak from experience. Indonesia had no intention of disrupting close and harmonious relations with the Netherlands. However, it seems that even today, as generations ago, the government of that nation insists upon giving too little and asking too much. Only when this became unbearable, permit me now to turn to the larger issue of war and peace in this world of ours. Very definitely, the new and reborn nations do not present a threat to world peace. We do not have territorial ambitions. We do not have irreconcilable economic aims. The threat to peace does not come from us, but rather from the older countries, from those long established and stable. Oh yes, there is turbulence in our countries. In fact, turbulence almost seems to be a function of the first decade of independence. But is this surprising? Look here, let me take an example from American history. In one generation we must undergo, as it were, the war of independence and the war between the states. Furthermore, in that same generation, we must undergo the rise of militant trade unionism, the period of the international workers of the world, the Wobblies. We must have our drive to the West. We must have our industrial revolution, and even, yes, our carpetbaggers. We must suffer our Benedict Arnold. We are, as I have said very often, compressing many revolutions into one revolution, and many generations into one generation. Do you then wonder that there is turbulence amongst us? To us, it is normal, and we have grown accustomed to riding the whirlwind. I understand well that to the man outside, often the picture must seem one of chaos and disorder, of coup and counter-coup. Still, this turbulence is our own, and it presents no threat to anyone, although often it offers opportunities to interfere in our affairs. The clashing interests of the big powers, though, are a different matter. There the issues are obscured by waving hydrogen bombs and by the reiteration of old and worn-out slogans. We cannot ignore them, for they threaten us. And yet, only too often, they seem unreal. I tell you frankly, and without hesitating, that we put our own future far above the wrangling of Europe. Yes, we have learned much from Europe and America. We have studied your history and the lives of your great men. We have followed your example. We have tried even to surpass you. We speak your languages and we read your books. We have been inspired by Lincoln and by Lenin, by Cromwell, by Garibaldi. And indeed, we have still much to learn from you in many fields. Today, though, the fields in which we have much to learn from you are those of technique and science, not those of ideas or of action dedicated by ideology. In Asia and Africa today, still living, still thinking, still acting, are those who have led their nations to independence.